is it noon yet? So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the talk on digital transformation. My name is Andrew Green. I work for Digital Realty, and I head up sales for the Eastern United States as well as Canada. So a 30-second commercial about who Digital Realty is before we start the session. So Digital Realty powers global IT strategies for companies of all sizes, enabling them to scale digital business with fit-for-purpose data center platform that delivers a controlled, connected, and optimized network architecture designed to address data gravity. We operate in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. And if you want to hear more about it, feel free to talk to me after the session. So we have two great speakers with us today, Krister Peltoma, and Michael Dombrowski. And today we're going to be talking about the rapid growth of data globally and the implications of data gravity intensity, why it's important to rethink hybrid IT architecture with the focus on optimizing data exchange, how to move the needle on digital transformation and the benefits of a connected data community approach, and strategies designed to yield greater competitive advantages and new growth opportunities. So, Mike, 30 seconds for you, and then Krister, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Yeah, sure. Nice to meet everybody. Mike Dombrowski. I'm with BDO Digital, which is part of BDO USA. BDO Digital is really like the tech consulting arm of the firm, right? So everything we're talking about today comes out of our group, whether it's artificial intelligence, analytics, infrastructure, cloud, IT strategy, cybersecurity, you name it. It all fits into that group right there. I've been with BDO I'm in my 6th year now. Interesting thing about my career is over the span of 30 some years, I spent half my career in industry roles, sitting behind the desk and actually having to do this for companies, and half my career in consulting roles. So I find myself back in the consulting roles with Citi before this. So it's great to be here with all of you today, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Mike.
So I'm Krister Peltoma, CIO, Chief Information Officer for Comcast Business. And Comcast Business is a unit within larger Comcast selling connectivity services, security services, phone services to businesses. We have about 2.5 million customers across the US in one of the fastest growing segments within Comcast, and we are right shy of $10 billion revenue. And data is something we generate a lot, and our customers are generating even more. So this is a topic that is very relevant for Comcast Business.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll start with our first question. This is a general comment. Mike, we'll start with you. What does digital transformation mean to you?
It might be easier to answer the question, what isn't digital transformation these days, right? There's really like two lenses that I look at it with. One lens is from the business side of it, like what is it about, what does it do, what is it made for? And then there's the tech side of it. What are the parts and pieces that are available to you to actually help what the business needs to do? So on the business side, things like client experience, right? That seems to be a big topic. In fact, we recently did a survey of 500 C-suites and came back with client experience is the number one thing that companies are focused on right now, right? So client experience, analytics, automation, robotics, all those types of things, market disruption, the convergence of IoT and OT, all those things are business-oriented things around digital transformation. Now on the backside of it, it's like, okay, so what are the technologies that are involved with this that are allowing us to do this? And I want to pause there for a second because digital transformation, as a term, it can be confusing, right? I view it as digital evolution, right? We've been evolving since IBM put out that first PC in 1981 at the end of the day, right? But evolution has a context of taking a long time, but what we're seeing right now is rapid intensification of evolution, right? And so, we've coined the term transformation because over the last 5 years, technology has really leapt forward so much. It's allowing us to look at everything a lot differently with a different lens than we have just 5 years ago, right? So things today like cloud, right? The entire cloud. 5 years ago was cloud here, yeah, but it was not even close to where it is today, and its capabilities allowing us to do the things that we can do today. The whole thing around analytics. Interestingly enough, analytics has been there for a while, However, again, when I look back at our survey, it's a thing that companies are still struggling with the most to mature. They're still kind of using it for real-time reporting instead of getting the intelligence and information out of it to help drive automation, robotics, and innovation into their business and product lines. So those types of services and technologies are now wireless. You say, well, wireless. So, wireless is now national. It's everywhere. Companies like Comcast, right? Like the other big Dish, everyone else, they're pouring into wireless because that's where it's headed, right? Streaming services and so forth. So the underlying technologies are the enablers of the transformation. That's basically how I look at it. Now, on the flip side of that, what's that translate to, which we're going to talk about today, data, number one. There's a lot more data available today than we ever had before. Just think of IoT, the devices you wear, all that kind of stuff, all creates data. And then security at the end of the day, right? Security has never been a bigger topic than it is in today's world. So that's kind of my take of it. It's a pretty broad view, but I kind of look at it from the business perspective. And then tech perspective, what do we do to enable that?
Great. Thanks for that. That was insightful. Krister, what do you have to
Mike covered it really well, but if I take a look 10, 15 years ago, digital often meant for businesses saying, hey, we're going to have a buy flow, digital buy flow, shopping cart, I can buy stuff online, or I have a My Account and I can go and administrate my account. Still important, but that was often took longer time because of kludgy back-end processes, support processes behind the scenes. But today, digital is so much more. Just from Comcast Business, take examples. When we sell an internet line, it's like, okay, I want a gigabit service, I want the gig this way and a gig other way. And if it's just the transport of data, it becomes very dominant, it becomes a commodity. But it's not a commodity because you as a user want to know what happens on that line. How much is this application using on the capacity on that line? Who is using the line? Any bad actors trying to use the line? What security threats do I block every single time? Is the line just the line, or is it also the Wi-Fi that you talked about, the wireless? I think 90% of the traffic in Comcast networks goes actually over the Wi-Fi before it hits the wireline. So it's all of that, and then you get all the devices. If you start building mobile apps for every product, one of my favorite examples is, if I take that, call it stupid internet line, just an internet connection, I put a mobile app where the user can see everything happening on that line. I can see security threats. I can see who is using it. I can kick someone out. I can add someone. Give access to someone. I can see how much bandwidth they are using. Now suddenly I have a face of that stupid line. It's not a water pipe anymore. I know exactly who's using my water pipe, and I know what they are using it for. It's like comparison to kind of the water infrastructure. It's like, okay, you can turn off the bathroom or you can turn off this or that, but you can see it every moment. But that, to Mike's point, it generates an enormous amount of data.
Right.
So now I get an enormous amount of data in all these mobile apps with 2.5 million customers in Comcast and probably 10 users on average behind every customer. So you have 25 million end devices talking to the network. Every one of those devices generate data. Do we store the data in the device? Do we store data in the cloud? Do we bring the data all the way into my enterprise data center? Where is the data? How is it correlated to it? That is the new problem to solve.
Yeah.
First, give a digital face to all these products we have, but then also, how do I handle all the back-end for it?
And what do we do with that data?
What do we do with the data?
Exactly. And as part of this discussion, I wanted to keep it interactive. If anyone has any comments or questions on some of the topics that you hear from some of the speakers, please, feel free to speak up. So thank you both for that. Let's move on to the next question. What should an organization understand about data gravity's implications? Krister, we'll start with you.
So if you generate all this enormous amount of data, multiple places, you need to kind of have a very good understanding for what is the data, what are going to use it for, who's going to use it for. There's privacy legislation coming in every state, one after the next. Europe, I came from Europe, and Europe is a little bit ahead on GDPR regulations of the data. So data, privacy around it, where's the data? Security about the data. You mentioned very briefly security. And security, we could talk for 2 hours just about the security topics here easily. So understanding how what data am I managing? How is that data growing? So it becomes a very data-centric view of, it's not just digital, but understanding the data in the end device, in my cloud, in my data center, how it moves between them, what replication of data do I have, who has access to the data, who should have access. I want to give the consumer as much access as possible so they know what data I have about them and they have control over the data. They own the data. But how do I mine it? How do I benefit from it? So,
Great. Yeah. It sounds like these are the challenges that keep you up at night.
yeah, exactly.
So Mike, same question to you.
Yeah. So I think playing off of that, and by the way, I lead our cybersecurity practice for BDO Digital, so I can talk security all day long if you want to. But playing off of that, right? See, the amount of data coming in now is coming in from more places than we did before, right? Again, IoT, OT converging, personal devices, everything is generating data. And the challenge that you have with that is it's an enormous amount of data. People want to get to it and analyze it, but they want to come at it from silos. So they grab data to put it here, they grab data to put it here, grab data to put it here, and everyone's having their different pockets of data now, which is very difficult to manage from an infrastructure perspective, from a performance perspective, from a security perspective. All those dimensions now become much more complex to manage. So the whole concept of data lakes and bringing the data together in a common format to protect it in a certain way and to make it available to the apps, with the whole concept around digital gravity, with apps are attracted to the data, right? So if you put the data all in one spot, all those apps now can come to one spot to get it versus trying to build their own repositories and take care of it. And now you're actually managing it better, along with the performance, right? The whole equation around it, including the bandwidth, the latency to get to the data. All very important these days because the amount of data is so immense and the amount of analytics you can do on it is much more intense. All those factors now, if you kind of separate it, it could be like death by 1,000 paper cuts versus if you bring it together, now I can manage the pipes coming into it, the access, the apps that are attracted to it. I have a much better environment to really get out of it what we're intending to get out of it, which is the information that it's trying to tell us about what to do around product innovation, growth, new products, new services, market disruption, those types of things.
Yeah, and you know the interesting thing is that the amount of data is going to continue to grow exponentially. So data gravity is going to be increasingly more important as people look to expand their organizations and optimize their workflows. So thank you for that. Question number 3, Mike, we'll start with you. How can connected data communities lead to greater value, revenue, and differentiation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It really is. So we have a view that there's an ecosystem now that is created, right, in digital transformation, which relates to the data, which you're now connecting customers, suppliers, vendors, and staff all together, right? So the revenue coming out of that, right, is really derived from the data that's coming from that ecosystem to analyze it and figure out what is going to sell. What's the new avenue of revenue, right? There's cost optimization. You'll always have that, right? We have clients now who are optimizing their distribution networks based upon data that we're analyzing, right? But when you look at that whole ecosystem, it's going to allow you to understand, are there new revenue channels that aren't tapped yet? Because there's new products and services that we need to buy. When you put that together, you now have a different view than if you were just trying to think of it in-house. Right? So the data allows you to identify these different revenue channels, whether they're new revenue or taking existing revenue and saying, how do I optimize my margins out of that by optimizing a distribution network, right? Becoming predictive in failing devices so I get ahead of the game. Those types of things out there. So I think that's a big piece of it, is connecting that ecosystem to the data, using that information to identify new revenue streams or optimizing current revenue streams.
Yeah, that's very smart. Thanks. I think the interesting thing that you just said is the actual data itself is leading us towards understanding our business better and helping be more profitable and everything else like that. So thank you. Krister, what do you think?
No, very much the same thing, that the more we understand what's happening out with the users, we collect that data, we can analyze the data, what's going on, how are they using my service. So that's the first step. The other step is to move out of the commodity track. Like you're selling something that becomes, everyone else has the same thing. You can really diversify your product, differentiate your product by understanding the data out there. We see it every day with Comcast. I took the internet line as an example. We have building networks. If we're building an advanced network between hundreds of locations for a business, you build a data network. You usually had that network. You had to put firewalls, you put security on it, but you really didn't know much what's going on every day. If I build a digital face to that product by having a mobile app or a portal or something, I can know exactly what's going on that network. Suddenly that service, it's not just a network, it's an insight of what's going on in my business. We have customers where we build those networks for, and suddenly they realize, why is this traffic going on at this time of the day, and what's going on in this call center, what's going on in that business, what is generating all this data? So the customer suddenly gets so much more out of their network than just the network, because they have an instant information about what's going on in the network. They get information of how their customers are using their guest Wi-Fi. They set up a guest Wi-Fi, they can see every traffic going on and say, when customers are coming in, looking at, sitting in my lobby, waiting to get service, this is what they use Wi-Fi for. So now the dentist can, or whatever it is, the small business owner selling food or whatever, can find services they can use by understanding that data. So it becomes, the B2B relationship gets much deeper because I can share data with my business customer what's going on, and his relationship to their consumers becomes much more informed of how they can develop the product. And it's just a wealth of data and understanding this stuff, and I think we're just scratching the surface so far. But
So the more data that we can understand and analyze, the more power we have in terms of affecting change.
Some of that data touches the privacy we talked about, but other of that data doesn't have to touch privacy. It can just be anonymized. I don't need to know who it is. I need to know behavior happening when people are sitting here. If I'm sitting in a car dealer and looking to buy a Ford, and I'm Googling General Motors data, the Ford want to know that. Okay, we take it too slow. They're looking for some other data. They're looking for competitors while they're sitting here. What's going on here? What do we do about it?
See, I think it connects back to that client experience, right? Up front, the client experience is really what it's telling you how you can drive more revenue out of it. Then you move down to the suppliers in your supply chain. It can tell you, how to optimize, the revenue that you're bringing in through your supply chain and the costs that are associated to it and the risk associated to your revenue. So it really has many, many different dimensions at driving revenue than just new products, right? But I think the client experience at the end of the day is still the number one thing that we're trying to use that data to understand how to improve service or how to deliver new services based upon what the actual client experience is actually telling us. And I think that was a blind spot we had before without having that data. We were kind of guessing it, or you did surveys, or you did this. Now we're saying, let the data tell. The data's telling us what's going on out there. We just have to interpret it right.
The data doesn't lie, as they say.
It is what it is, right?
Surveys are only as accurate as the people that fill them out. Do they fill them out correctly? So
Null skewed results by who you are. Those that don't respond are maybe those that you really want to know what they were thinking.
Exactly. Great. Okay, so the fourth question, how can enterprises manage the complexity of hybrid IT infrastructure? Krister.
Go first.
It's like I'm losing hair every day over this. It's like you think we have our old data centers, and we had multiple different data centers, and then you put data in AWS, and you put it in Azure, and then you put private cloud, and then you have all the devices. So it's a wealth of data there, and I think this is something that is evolving as we're doing it. It's just understand. And I was talking to my 16-year-old boy being in high school learning programming, and I said, when I was in high school, we had 10 megabyte data storage for the whole high school, and we call it the Winchester storage. And it was like, tells my age a little bit, but that enormous explosion, he generates 10 megabyte on one picture on his phone. So it would fill up that whole storage. So that enormous explosion of data everywhere, I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I think it's a focus. It is a work around it, understanding the complexity of it, and start setting up an infrastructure for something that maybe didn't exist before. And infrastructure, I mean business processes, architecture, thoughts, people around it, and start working on it. A lot of IT work has gone away over the last decade with clouds and I don't need as many people working in the server room as I had 10 years ago, because it's much automated and managing a storage array or whatever, it's way more simplified now than 10 years ago. But I need other people now to orchestrate this kind of hybrid data everywhere.
Yeah. It's interesting because, again, even 5 years ago, you didn't have some of the technology available to deal with this today. Right? Today, cloud is much more. Before, if you wanted to set something up, most people are doing it on-prem. They're building their own servers, right? Now they're using AWS, they're using Azure, they're using Google, right? And then you have hybrids of that where you have like AWS Outpost, right? Because when you get so much data and you're worried about bandwidth and latency, then an outpost might be better to use versus using the actual AWS cloud, right? So you have options out there. What you have to do is, the complexity of it is understanding what you're doing with that data, where it really needs to lie, understanding the performance requirements, the latency that you need to manage, right? And then you turn around and say, now I have answers to any one of those. For this particular one, we're going to use AWS Outpost. For this, we're going to use the cloud, AWS Cloud, or Azure Cloud, and we're going to put it out there, we're going to manage it because the latency, the performance, the infrastructure, everything is satisfactory there, and it's lower cost than if I did maybe the Outpost version of that. So you have to really understand what you're doing with it, what your strategy and your plan is around it, and then step back and say, which one do I use? Do I use one? Do I use a combination? And then more importantly, do I do it myself or do I use providers such as ourselves and so forth to help you, right? Because Comcast has the benefit, I'd say, of being large, having IT, having the skills, the talent. In the middle market, you really don't see that. They don't really have the skills and the talent. So using service providers and partners to help you manage that complexity, I think is also a key to the ingredient. So the tools are there, right? Understanding what your game plan is and your strategy around what you need to do, apply those tools to it, and then apply how you're going to support that through either direct support or outsourcing or a combination thereof.
It's a decision many businesses are facing
right
right
now.
now.
Yeah.
And I think the latency you're talking about is a very important one.
It's a huge
The speed of light is only the speed of light, and it's fast, but it's not fast enough many times. A round trip to the west coast and back, it's like 40 milliseconds just by the time for the light to go, and that's sometimes too much latency. And if you have to do a few pings, you have to request the data, you have to send back, and you have to go a few times back and forth. You quickly have half a second latency, and that's the user experience that you talked a lot about. It's just not there.
Yep.
And especially for those very close devices. If I get a 1 second delay on my Apple Watch, I would be annoyed. The data needs to respond much, much closer. And it's like been always an issue with satellite providers. And the satellite is so far off that it takes a second for a round trip, just the speed of light.
So it's interesting you say that. So, the downfall, the drawback of data gravity is it can potentially exacerbate those issues because you're creating so much more data, so many more devices, users trying to access that data. How do you best take advantage of all that? So,
and if I say I store everything in the cloud, but the cloud is close to me where I am, and then I'm on vacation in California, suddenly my experience is totally different because all the data is in the cloud on the East Coast.
Right. So these are the challenges we're faced with now. It's funny, a couple years ago we were facing a different set of challenges. So I'm not sure how much time we have left.
I have no idea. What time is it?
A couple minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So does any of you have any questions for our panelists? Maybe, will you hand him that mic? Thanks.
So I manage a co-working space down in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and I see the benefit. If we were able to see like what everyone in the space was searching, we'd have a much better understanding of what our audience was in the space. I mean, I can see who's in the space based on what bandwidth, like what all their bandwidth is. I can see, okay, this person came in at 3 o'clock on a Saturday in the morning. Like, what are they doing at our space at the break of dawn? Like, that'd be weird. I guess my question is, like, what are your guys' thoughts on, like, the, like, ethics and, like, privacy issues of tracking, like, super granular data? Like, if I were to know what they were all searching, like, I see the benefits of it, but, like, how do we balance it on, like, the privacy side?
Yeah, it's a great question. I spend a lot of time thinking privacy, and I think one approach we have taken within Comcast is to try to, Apple has done a really great job. They're telling the data is yours and you decide what you want us to store. We can store all of this data, but they have a privacy portal, you can log in and you can see it. And that's kind of the approach we want to take, is telling the customer that I have this data, and I would like to have it because I can provide these benefits if I have it to you. If it's a security monitoring for security reasons, that's maybe you don't want to share everything you know. There's security cameras and things like that. Some of it can go in the security space of saying this is a security space, need to be very restricted who's using it. But the transparency back to the consumer of saying I have this data and I know it to this level is super critical, and get their consent saying yes, there's a value that you have it. Take my simple example is drove up here from Philadelphia and I'm using Waze GPS. They know how fast I'm driving, they know my average speed, they know how much I usually speed, so they estimate the time on the normal speeding, the 10%, I call it the sales tax, added to the speed. So they estimate, and they can predict within a minute when I'm gonna arrive here. So it's good for me to know that. I let them have that data because they give something good back to me. So if I'm willing to share the data to a trusted partner if they give something back to me. If it's just monitoring and knowing what I'm doing, not so much. And especially if they are not transparent with it. And I suddenly learn afterwards that, oh, they knew much more about me than I knew that they knew. That's the worst situation. I think legislators are stepping in and saying, if you have this data, you have to disclose it to the consumers. Security space of monitoring your facility. Okay, there's always been security cameras, but again, there's ethics around that as well. Of not putting security cameras in the bathroom, or there's like a line that has to be held.
Yeah. No, I think just to add on to that, or re-emphasize that, it's understanding what you think you need as far as the data goes, right? And then having the consumer, the clients, understand what that data is, and they have to opt in or opt out, whether you can actually see that data or not. Because every state is going to have its own privacy laws, EU has its privacy laws, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. So you have to understand like what data is meaningful for you, right, to actually help your business get better and bring value back to your clients, right? Most of that data is going to be stuff that the client, they're going to go, yeah, whatever, it's not a big deal. If you say, I want to monitor your financial transactions, right, that's never going to fly, right? Right? We all know that, right? But you're not asking that, right? So I think it's about just understanding for you, what's that you're looking for that would help you bring better value to them as a service provider, right? And then you have to disclose that to them, and they have to opt in, and they can say, yeah, that's fine, or no, it's not, right? Now I agree with Christopher that legislation, I think it's going to happen, right? We're behind.
California is
US is behind. Yeah, it's going to happen where it's going to be like the EU where, you know, people are going to have to say, hey, I gave it to you, but I'm done with that. You have to now delete all my data and prove to me that it's all clear. And I think that's just controls that are going to be put in place around it. It's not to stop you from saying, I need really good information to make my service better. Here's what I need. Everyone goes, that's business. We get that, right? But you have to make sure that you're actually protecting your clients in their privacy and what that data is. Make sense? Yeah.
I really appreciate the insight of like being clear as to like what value that's going to bring back to them.
Yeah.
Disclosing that to them, and then like if you're bringing value back to them, and then you care that you're using the data because it's benefiting.
It's benefiting them.
And once you have the data, the security around that data. Now you're holding something personal to a person. So how you protect the data is extremely important.
If we have time for one more, I mean,
Do we have time for one more? Yes, we do.
I just want to make a point about the digital transformation aspect of it. About it, I think it's kind of like a made-up marketing word. Personally, truthfully, it's like sassy, right? That's a made-up word that Gartner gets credit for, personally. But we all talk about it because it's really cool, right? But everything that you guys talked about today is we're going to require businesses to be really flexible. And the new way we're consuming technology, networking, right? We're a partner with Comcast, so we're always talking about reliability, predictability, and its flexibility. So all the data consumption we talk about, traversing the network, we need to have models of consumption that allow consumers to have technology in a flexible manner. So that's why we do networking and communications as a service, right? So everything we talked about is to have flexibility. So I appreciate you guys speaking
absolutely,
about it.
yeah.
For sure.
That's all I was thinking about was
Flexibility
being
and
agile.
agility,
It's
right?
business. We have to be mobile. If we're not mobile, all this transformation can't happen. We're stuck.
Right, and as a service provider, if we can't pivot to the needs of our consumer, we're going to fall behind as well, right? So I completely agree with your point.
It's like, no, just to add one to that. So Comcast has built a fiber networks and copper network for 60 years. In the last 10 years, pretty much everything we do is to make that software defined. Because if it's physical network, one of our clients, 6,000 locations, and they have a firewall in every location to monitor what traffic is going in. If there's a gap in that firewall, we need to close a open port. With 6,000 truck rolls, or there's 6,000 logging in to it. If it's a software-defined firewall, it's 1 minute change. Instead of 6,000 times doing that 10-minute change. So it's a totally changing the flexibility of a complex thing like a big data network between 6,000 locations.
Well, the traffic we rerouted, internet traffic has been completely rerouted right now. I mean, I didn't grow up with that. I'm a younger guy, so I didn't see we ran everything through security stacks, but it's different. It's changed, right? It's totally changed. So it's interesting.
Priscilla and I actually were pulling the cables in the old days.
Oh man! All right.
We still need the cables. They're still there. We still have 700,000 miles of fiber, which is 3 times to the moon or something like that. But
I have a question a little more on the flip side. We talk about data, we talk about collecting data, and much more of it as technology progresses. How do we deal with the user experience with data? What do you do with that data? I mean, how do you serve the user? What technologies do you guys employ? So let's say Comcast Business, I'm a small business owner, and I need to get meaning out of this data. How do you guys approach that? AI technology, contextual. So data without context and meaning is noise. So if you're collecting all of this data, it just becomes noise. You really have to filter it and apply meaning to it to get something out of it. So that's more of a question of, once you have this big data, you're collecting it, how do you create meaning? How do you use it meaningfully for the customer or for the user?
great question. And I think the first step, and I can speak to my own examples, and thanks for being a Comcast customer. So if you take an internet line, I talked a little bit about that, and you have a Wi-Fi behind that internet line. The first is to give the app, the digital interface to that app of say, what's going on my network. So I understand who's connected to the Wi-Fi, what traffic is it, what security threats do I have. To just start giving you the face, so it's not just the water pipeline coming into a building and the water is distributed somewhere. So it's actually a real thing, my connectivity. And the second is how do I use that app now to provide you the additional data? I think a lot more developing, just using AI, machine learning technologies to generate data, and finding other small businesses using the data similar to you. What do they do that brings bigger value by analyzing the data on a bigger scheme and then provide that back to you through that interface? A lot of investment.
I'll give you a
in that specific space.
So another kind of different lens on that, right? Furniture maker. I make furniture, you buy furniture. You're the client at the end of the day. I manufacture and build over in Asia, shipping containers, I bring it to the US, I distribute it, right? I've now connected all those systems. I'm getting all that data in. One, I want to understand my cost. I want to optimize my supply chain. I have to understand trades and tariffs and all that good stuff, right? So I'm bringing all that data and doing all that analysis. What am I doing for you? I'm opening up that data now and say, hey, you place an order online, you customize your furniture, you're watching it be made, You're seeing it put into the container. You know which container it's in. You know which ship it's on. You're watching it cross the Pacific. You're watching it dock. It's now on a truck. You know which truck it's in. You know when it's going to be delivered, right? Your whole experience now has become part of what I'm using the data for to run my business better. But now I've let you in to make your experience better at the same time. That's a way that how you can use this data to both run your business better, but also drive in that customer experience.
Excellent. Very good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you both, Mike, Krister. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us. Thank you as well. Again, my name is Andrew Green, and this wraps up the session. So thanks again.
Thanks, guys.